बोलो कैमरा बंद।
Action. Roll camera.
Action.
Hi, I'm Mahek Saikia, your host for today, and for today's discussion, we'll be interviewing Professor Anish Tore. Anish Tore is the political thought course professor at Flame University, and he's completed his master's in political science from the University of Pune, and since then, he's gone to publish a number of articles on media platforms such as NewsClick, Down to Earth, and Youth Ki Awaaz. Today we'll be focusing on a movement that's been resurfacing lately and gauged attention again, feminism. Feminism has been a movement which has been around since the mid 1800s and has seen many periods and contrasting opinions. From radical feminists to womanism, its attention has peaked and fallen throughout the years. We'll be discussing the nature of each of these feminist movements, what it means to be a feminist, and what its future may look like. So, Professor, how would you define a feminist? That's okay.
Okay.
We're rolling now.
Yes, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
How would you define a feminist?
So anyone who is really interested in establishing a society which is more gender equal or gender equal to the absolute possible sense, I would describe all such people as feminists. So feminism is a struggle for gender equality. That is how I perceive it.
Okay. So, would you call yourself a feminist?
Yes, I don't have any hesitation because of two things. Firstly, I feel that moving towards a gender equal society is really a step towards making society better. So it is like a social good, but also on a personal level, I would say a lot of men have an issue with the term feminist. They won't describe themselves as feminists because they really perceive feminism as really, let's say, I guess, an attack on men's rights, whereas that is not the case to the best that I understand. Just like a patriarchal society restricts the domain of women to certain domains of life, it does the same for men as well. Okay, and therefore if we have a more gender equal society, I feel that not only women but also men get liberated, but in a different manner. So that is why I would say people who some men have a problem with calling themselves as feminists, but I am not one amongst them.
Also, I've heard that a lot of women also have a problem being called feminists. Why do you think is that? What is the hesitation, as you said?
I would say, like, let's just talk in the context of Indian society. Feminism is it gets a bad rap because it is considered to be a Western idea which is not in tune with Indian reality, and I guess there's this whole allegation against feminism that it is basically an anti-family movement. So basically an idea that has set out to destroy the institution of family. And if you look at how Indian society is structured, I would say family is one place where women really find some comfort or some role that they can play, because all other domains are closed to them, and therefore I guess they have bought into this narrative. Therefore I think that is one of the issues.
So obviously there are a lot of gender expectations that have come to be, and speaking like throughout our conversation, I've realized that I guess Western culture might be a little more ahead of us when it comes to feminism and accepting the idea of feminism. So in the context of just India, what do you think that are some gender expectations that we've grown up with?
There are plenty of them. So for example, the whole idea that the entire domestic sphere, whatever is the responsibility of a woman, whether it is raising a child, whether it is basically all household activities. So it is as if it's a natural expectation or a natural duty for a woman to perform those, and it's not just limited to that. So something that feminists have referred to as emotional labor. Okay, so in case there is some sort of emotional crisis, if let's say some person is seeking some sort of emotional help in the family structure, okay, it is expected that the women of the household really take up that responsibility. So these are some of the I would say some of the expectations from women that are seen as natural extensions of them being women. Okay, there's no recognition of their labor. It's just that since you're a woman, you have to do all of these.
So I understand that now we have these gender expectations in place, but what do you think started all of it? Like, why was the whole idea of a woman being lesser than a man ever accepted? Is it biological? Is it, you know?
So firstly, there's this whole idea that women. Okay, should we stop?
No, just continue.
We'll just wait for this. Yeah.
The thing is, I can't cut, so
Okay,
yeah, it's
okay.
a one take thing.
Okay, we'll just wait for this.
Cut. Pause.
We're short on battery as well.
Huh?
We're short on battery.
No, we have battery, but
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
So my question is, I understand that these gender expectations have been set in place now, but how do you think they came to be ever? Why was the idea that a woman is lesser than a man ever accepted or emerged?
So radical feminists have really come up with this, explanation, where they say that the patriarchal society conflates biological sex with gender roles. The whole idea that since it is the woman who is supposed to give birth or is biologically capable of giving birth, then raising of a child is her natural responsibility. So I guess gender roles get framed in such a manner as if they are a natural extension of their biological capacities. So that is how gender roles really came about to be. Secondly, this whole idea that women are biologically weaker or physically weaker, and therefore they should be confined to some sort of private or domestic space, whereas if you are in the public space, it really requires you to be strong both physically and mentally, and that is something that only men are capable of doing. So again, it's kind of building upon the whole idea of biological weakness of a woman. As I think I have had this conversation with you before, domestication of women in the sense that them being confined to the domain of the house is something that has happened only after the Industrial Revolution, where before the Industrial Revolution, the site of production, of productive labor is either inside the house or it is in the farm, and therefore women can contribute to that activity in a almost equal manner. But once you have the Industrial Revolution and once you have the factory setup being created, one person has to stay at home and the other person has to go out and work in the factory. So that is how women's labor, firstly it becomes confined to the house, and secondly this whole idea then, since the labor that the man is performing is the one that is earning money, therefore under capitalism, the labor that earns money is more important. The labor that the woman does at home, it is non-monetary, therefore it is not that important. So that is the classification. I would personally even like to contest this whole idea that women being physically or biologically weaker. I feel that if there are some differences in the physical abilities of men and women today, I would see them not as natural, but as a result of maybe hundreds or thousands of years of domestication of women. Since you have been confined to a domestic space where not a lot of heavy labor was involved, maybe that has over a period of time translated into some sort of biological or physical feebleness, but that is not a natural attribute, as even some feminists would accept women are physically weaker. That is not something that I would accept.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
So feminism is not a new ideology, we all know this. It's been around since the mid 1800s, right? That was when the first wave was, and it's seen very contrasting opinions. So do you think it was very different then, the first wave, as compared to where we are with feminism and its objectives now?
the objectives have certainly changed, because the feminist movement has really, there's not a lot of recognition of what gains and what achievements that the feminist movement has, really like they have achieved over this period of 200-300 years. So you mentioned the 1800s. The 1800s was the first wave of feminism, which is broadly, in today's academic terms, it is described as liberal feminism. And what were the demands of liberal feminism? The demand that women be allowed to work in public spaces, women be allowed to do work that earns money. Secondly, women be given the right to vote, women be given the right to stand for public offices or maybe elections in that sense. So today we take all of these rights for granted. It is because the first wave feminists in India, not in India but across the world, okay, they really won those rights, okay, a century ago, and that is why women today don't really have to struggle for those rights. Okay, so it's definitely the agendas of the feminist movement have changed, partially because of the growing understanding of both patriarchy and the women's situation, but also because some of the older aims and objectives of the feminist movement have been met. Okay, so they have been successful. That is why the goalpost has been shifting.
Okay. So my next question is about intergenerational fighting of feminists.
Okay.
So there was, when the Me Too movement was in action, a lot of radical feminists were opposed to it.
Okay.
And then there was this one particular comment that was really shocking for everyone to hear about. And a radical feminist had said something along the lines of, what do you expect after opening your legs up to someone in the first place?
Okay.
So what would you have to say about that? So it kind of just started like a whole fight like between radical feminists and feminists today.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're very like different objectives, I would say. Radical feminists completely shun men.
So in your like question, there's an assumption that the feminists today are actually not radical, whereas the older feminist generation is radical. So that maybe you should really like think upon that. Yes, so I think the intergenerational tussle is mostly about surrounding the issue that younger generation of feminists seem more interested in let's say issues regarding sexual emancipation. Okay, whereas I would say the older generation of feminists are like they are not oblivious to the sexual emancipation part, but they would say that the feminist movement has more broader concerns, whether it is the economic empowerment or basically even analyzing the structures of patriarchy. Okay, all of us are so much internalized with patriarchal logic, it would take decades of unlearning and critical thinking for you to really understand how you are being oppressed. So maybe the question that you are asking is the older generation of feminists have really broadened their scope, and maybe they feel that issues of sexual autonomy and sexual emancipation may feel important to women and feminists at a particular age. Okay, but it is when you get older or when you have a better understanding of the world, those issues may not matter that much. Okay, and maybe it's a kind of a plea by the older generation that you should maybe expand your horizons beyond the sexual emancipation agenda.
Okay, that's fair. Yes, my question was, what wave of feminism do you think we're in right now?
What wave of feminism we are in right now?
Like,
so this is actually also up for debate. Some people or some feminists would say that we are now in the middle of the fourth wave of feminism, especially after the Me Too movement, whereas even I really agree with this assessment. Some would say that the third wave of feminism, which started in the 1980s, it is yet to, it's still going on, and the Me Too movement really represented nothing new in terms of the issues, and in a way I agree with that assessment, because what at the core of the Me Too movement, what's the core of the Me Too movement? That you have women who have really complaints against sexual harassment at the workplace, and they are expressing those on social media platforms or online platforms. Now, sexual harassment at workplace has been an old issue. So, the issue itself is not old. Maybe the method is old. Maybe I would say the women who are coming out, they have a new confidence that they would not be judged, and they have a feminist solidarity. So, the situation has changed, but as it does not represent any new issues. As let's say there was a major shift when we observed a shift from first wave to second wave. Okay, the issues of the second wave were not at all present in the first wave. So, I would say, if you ask me, we are still in the third wave of feminism. The fourth wave is still up for debate.
Okay, and also I think it's very intersectional with all these, like with the first, second, and the earlier waves. They all had clear-cut objectives, and now, well, we just don't know what our main objective is, I feel.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's just my opinion. Yeah. Also, they say that this wave is online. It's like a digital wave. What do you think about that? Do you think that's impactful?
Definitely. So, I would say, I'll give you a parallel of the Dalit movement. Okay, I think it is relevant here. Many people who have observed the Dalit movement say that the Dalit movement in India is very assertive in the urban areas. Okay, where very paradoxically urban areas may caste atrocities are not at that level. Okay, if you compare urban areas and rural areas, caste atrocities in general are more in rural areas. So, that is where you would expect that the Dalit movement would be more fierce and aggressive, but it is actually aggressive in the urban areas. And so, some people see a dichotomy in that, but the answer to that question, why the Dalit movement is stronger in urban areas, is that oppressed voices really express themselves where there is some space available. Okay, in the context of the Dalit movement, okay, rural spaces there is still no like opportunity for them to express themselves. So, they escape from that space, and they express themselves at a space in the urban public sphere where that is possible. Something similar is also happening with the Me Too movement. Okay, so when people say that the online, digital, social media platforms are probably not the best place to express yourselves, because it's expression and there is nothing else that is happening. You need to understand that that is probably the only space that is available for women who are already facing sexual harassment, okay, and they don't have access to other public spaces. What are the other public spaces? You have the media, which is again dominated by men. Okay, then you have let's say public spaces such as civil society or maybe the political sphere. Again, the representation of women is like 10 or 15% in parliament. So, when the other public spaces are enclosed to you, okay, then you don't think about whether it is the right space to express yourself. You try to make the best of the opportunity that any space provides you. And yes, it has been effective. I would say right from, I think, what is his name? Harry Weinstein. So he was basically he was in a way the dawn of Hollywood. Okay, and really Hollywood has in a way boycotted him after that. So I would say we can't call the Me Too movement as ineffective. Yes, maybe in societies like India it has not been as effective, but still when many of these cases is women coming out after, let's say, 10 years of harassment or 15 years of harassment. So it maybe after 15 years, if you feel that you can speak about an issue, okay, that itself is a sign of progress.
Okay. So how would you say the LGBTQ community is viewed by feminists, and do they like belong in the space according to you?
So I would say that the feminist movement is a natural ally of the LGBTQ movement, and it is not me saying it. In a way, just like I told you that social media provided a space for the Me Too movement, similarly it was the feminist movement which created safe spaces where people with alternative sexual identities felt safe enough to basically express themselves. So this is how it has happened. Okay, it is not a question of me trying to associate the two. It is the LGBTQ movement really sees the feminist movement as an ally, and I think the common point between them is that both of them are oppressed because of their sexual identities. So yeah, so that really provides them a great common ground to collaborate. So I think they share a very healthy relationship.
I mean, yes, some people do believe that, some feminists do believe that they should like be a part of it, collaborations and all, and some feminists don't think that, and they boycott the entire community, right, in a way. So do you think, as I stated before, do you think all these contradictory opinions, especially in today's feminist movement, do you think the main objective kind of just gets lost, and like even when it comes to pornography and prostitution, a lot of topics, a lot of feminists from different waves have very different opinions. So you know, if you as a community, like a feminist community, can't you know, unite and figure out your own opinion and objective,
Yes.
do you think?
So I think there are
lost?
two different questions here. One is the LGBTQ movement and the feminist movement. So like I said at the very outset, that the feminist movement is one to establish a gender equal society, and we have to acknowledge that there aren't only two genders, right? So if your aim is to establish a gender equal society, it means a gender equal society for all across the entire sexual spectrum, which includes the LGBTQ movement. So if you claim that you are a feminist but you don't really associate with LGBTQ issues, then sorry to say, you are not a feminist. Okay, so that is point number one. Point number two, about the issues regarding the views of different feminists regarding issues such as prostitution and pornography. Now again, I would like to give you a very rooted example. In Maharashtra, in the 1970s, you had this debate, if I'm not wrong, Durga Bhagwat, who was really one of the leading feminists in Maharashtra. She really was campaigning for rights of sexual workers, saying that sex work should be legalized, okay, and because sex workers face a lot of problems. Let's say a sex worker is being raped, okay. Today, the law does not recognize the possibility of rape of a sexual worker, because the law would say that, okay, you chose that profession, okay. And in that let's just extend that example. A sex worker approaches a police station saying that I have been raped. Before the rape charge can kick in, okay, she will be put into jail because sex work is illegal, okay. So Durga Bhagwat, coming from a liberal feminist point of view, says that sex work should be legalized, okay. Now against Durga Bhagwat, there is one person who really spearheaded the Dalit movement in Maharashtra, someone called as Namdev Dasar, and he said that please look at which section of women are pushed into sex work, okay. There might be women in Western countries where some women really choose sex work as a profession, there is a choice, okay. But in societies such as India, sex work is a default choice, or women are mostly pushed into sex work, okay, and these are again women from the margins, okay, and these are women who are tribals, who are Dalit women. There's a red light area in Pune, okay, you should go and visit it there, okay. I saw a overwhelming representation of women from northeastern areas, okay. So women from the margins are pushed into sex work. So please don't. So Namdev Dasar said to Durga Bhagwat that if you are so fond of sex work, probably you should take it up, okay. She was
So there's a lot of different schools of feminism with a lot of contrasting opinions about the same topic, such as prostitution or pornography. Now, do you think that because they are not they're not a united front, because there's a lot of different opinions, do you think it kind of loses the meaning of what feminism really stands for and what its objectives are?
Not really. I would say that if all feminists agreed on all issues, then there's no need for a movement, okay. The fact that you have different opinions on different issues, really it shows that, you know, the movement is alive and kicking, and that is how movements really evolve. So that I don't see it as a point of weakness. Secondly, you talked about LGBTQ movement and the feminist movement. Those who are actually working at the grassroots, they have this experience that they're really short on numbers, people who are actually working on issues. So any help that they can get in the sense that the more different movements really merge with each other, okay, like it really helps them. About pornography and prostitution, so I would say the main distinction is between, let's say, a school of liberal feminists who would say that prostitution or sex work should be legalized. By the way, prostitution is not a term that feminists would use, they use sex work, okay. Because since sex workers are basically deemed illegal, okay, they have no recourse to any sort of legal mechanisms or legal help when they are oppressed. So a sex worker can never really approach the police saying that she has been raped, because then first she would be put into jail saying that you are practicing prostitution, therefore you have committed the illegal activity. So that is why liberal feminists would demand legalization of sex work, whereas third world feminists, intersectional feminists जो है, they would really make a much more complicated argument, saying that you really need to look at which sections of society really do these sex workers emerge from. Okay, maybe in some industrialized countries women take up sex work as a profession owing to their own independent choice. Maybe it is something they don't want to do, or maybe it's one of the more highly paid professions, okay, apparently. But that is not the case in India. Women in India who are currently performing sex work, okay, most of them were forced into doing sex work due to their poverty, or they were sold into brothels. They are actually victims of human trafficking. Many women from Nepal, many women from Northeast, okay, they are basically a victim of human trafficking. Someone promises them that we are going to give you a good job in some urban metropolitan city, and they are just tricked and drugged into. And therefore this whole idea that if we end up legalizing prostitution, will we basically be legalizing the oppressive cycle that pushed them into prostitution? I mentioned this debate between Durga Bhagwat and Namdev Dhasar, where Durga Bhagwat, a Maharashtrian feminist, called for legalization of sex work, whereas Namdev Dhasar, who was a leader of the Dalit movement, really pointed out that most women who are pushed into sex work are coming from marginalized backgrounds, okay, and therefore there is no need to celebrate that kind of profession. They are doing it not out of choice but due to their condition, okay. And he actually had a very shrewd suggestion for Durga Bhagwat that if you are so fond of sex work, probably you should try practicing it. So that these are the different things. About pornography, I'll just mention, many women really, many feminists object and really oppose pornography because it is seen as really again using women's bodies for male pleasure. Whereas a stream of radical feminists really argue that why should like the famous adage goes, why should boys have all the fun, in the sense that just like men have the freedom to explore their sexual passions, so should women have that freedom. And definitely there is a problem with pornography, because just look at your students of communication, right? Just look at the camera angles in a in a porn film, okay. They are basically situated in such a manner to maximize male pleasure, okay. Many porn films do not even show the face of the man. So some radical feminists have actually argued that women also have a right to sexual pleasure, and therefore you should come up with an idea such as feminist porn, okay. So that is how the debate is really shaped at this current juncture.
So do you think the government is doing enough to protect sex workers, or just enough to support feminism in India?
Is it about sex workers or
just feminism in general? Do you think the government of India does enough to ensure equality?
I would say it is actually naive to expect any government to support any ism, in the sense, because social movements, whether it is feminism or the socialist movement or any movement, they are at their very core they are anti-establishment, and state is the establishment, okay. So you will never find any example across human history where states are actually supporting anti-establishment movements, including feminism. However, I would here try to make a distinction between women's empowerment and women's emancipation. And I would say in India, the Indian state has actually hijacked the entire women's empowerment discourse. Okay, so they are doing a lot for women's empowerment, okay, but they are doing very almost nothing for women's emancipation. Okay, women's emancipation is the goal of the feminist movement. Women's empowerment is basically the state creating avenues where women get empowered in certain minute manner, so that they can contribute to economy and society in a much more productive manner, without disturbing the other, I would say, like, without disturbing state power, without disturbing patriarchy, without disturbing capitalism. Okay, so women's empowerment is basically state enabling women's education, so that you can enter the workforce, so that the employer can have cheaper labor, because normally women get, women are offered less money. So that would be a case of women's empowerment. Women being offered education, so that they can probably perform their role as a mother much better. Okay, so let's say if you are an educated mother, then you have an additional responsibility of ensuring that your children basically do very well in academics. But if you are an uneducated woman, then the family cannot pressure you because you don't have that skill set. And therefore I'll just focus on the role of women's education in India. Across, I think, the country, various states really offer free education for women up to 10th or 12th standard, which is, we'll categorize that as primary education. Now primary education will make you a better worker, will make you a better mother, okay, but it is only at the level of higher education where women really have the get the capacity to think, get the capacity to liberate themselves. So just look at this dichotomy, that state is offering free education for women at primary level, but it is not offering free education for women at the higher education level. Because if you start to think critically and think on your own, which is only possible in higher education, then that will pose a great problem for the state or society in general.
It's a threat, I guess. So to conclude,
Yes.
I want to ask you, do you have a favorite feminist or a favorite feminist movement, and why?
Okay, so I don't know whether the feminist movement really recognizes him as a feminist, but I think he has contributed to the cause of women in India much more than any other movement. And I would say Ambedkar is actually India's, true feminist. He is the one who really pushed for the Hindu Code Bill, which gave Hindu women equal rights in property, equal rights in marriage, equal rights in divorce. Okay, and when that bill was not really being, accepted by parliament, he resigned as a law minister. So I would say, in terms of contribution for actual women's emancipation, I feel that Ambedkar is an unrecognized feminist hero. And I would really, another reason why I feel that he is a feminist and he is an icon that you should really, follow, is firstly, he exemplifies that you don't need to be a woman to understand women's oppression and to work for women's liberation, right? He was a man, yes, but so this whole idea that even if you are a man, you can really, if you are empathetic enough, if you are sensitive enough, you can understand women's oppression. So he is a living example of that. That is why I would consider him to be an icon. And secondly, the women that he worked for, okay, today it is the women of the Hindu upper class and upper caste, okay, who have benefited by due to his reforms, okay, and these women really do not recognize his contribution. Ambedkar was someone who knew that, the people who are going to benefit from his actions are not going to credit him. Still, that didn't prevent him from really working for their emancipation. So that level of, commitment to the cause of women's liberation, even if these are the same women who really, I think, have very nasty things to say about him. So I would say it really requires a man of, very high, I would say, I don't know about intellect, but like a very high order to really work for someone who is not really interested in even acknowledging your efforts. So I would say I would describe him as my icon.
That's actually very interesting. I will be sure to read up on that,
Sure,
but we're out of time right now. So Thank you, Professor, for being here.
Yes.
And thank you guys
My
for
pleasure.
watching.
Thank you.